Welcome to Hollow Street, where every single person has vanished and time itself has stopped. The wind held down the empty street as rain lashed against the windows of the boarded-up convenience store. I pulled my thin jacket tighter around me, trying to block out the cold seeping through my bones. My phone was dead, so I had no idea what time it was, but I figured it was probably close to midnight. I'd been wandering this deserted city for hours, taking in the eeriness of the abandoned buildings and streets. As I walked, I noticed a flickering light coming from between two of the buildings up ahead. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to see, but when I rounded the corner, it turned out to be a bus. Relief washed over me. Maybe there was still life here somewhere. Maybe I could find someone who could help me get back home. The bus stop sign said Nighthawk Express, which didn't ring any bells. I wasn't sure if the bus would even take me anywhere, but at this point, I was willing to try anything. As I approached the bus, I could hear voices coming from inside. People, real people. I raced up the steps and threw open the doors, making my way to the back of the bus. There were 4 other people on the bus, all asleep except for the driver. He looked at me with tired eyes as I slumped into a seat. "Last stop," he said gruffly before turning back to the road. I nodded, grateful for the opportunity to rest my weary feet. But it didn't take long for me to notice something odd about the driver. He seemed to be driving without using his steering wheel, and we hadn't moved since I got on the bus. When I turned to look out the window, I realized that the street had changed. We were now on a street I hadn't seen before, lined with identical houses with their lights turned off and their curtains drawn. The driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. His expression was unreadable. I tried to catch his eye and ask him where we were, but he always looked away. I looked back out the window. The houses were old and dilapidated, some with peeling paint, others with broken window panes. It felt like we were driving through someone's memory, not a street in any reality I recognized. Just when I started to panic, the bus lurched forward. As we drove, I scanned the faces of the other passengers, hoping to find someone awake, someone who could tell me what was going on. But they were all fast asleep, their mouths slightly open, their chests rising and falling with each breath. The bus continued down the deserted street, passing house after house until we came to a stop in front of a building I instantly recognized. It was the school I'd visited in episode 2, the one with the playground and the clock tower. But the bus driver didn't stop. Instead, he turned the corner and headed down a narrow alleyway. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The alley was too small for a bus to fit through, but somehow our bus was magically shrinking, becoming narrower and shorter until it was small enough to drive down the alley. At the end of the alley, we turned left onto a street I knew well. It was the street where I found the grocery store in the last episode, and as we drove past the familiar buildings, I noticed something strange. All of the shop windows were dark, as if the town had suddenly plunged into darkness. The bus slowed to a stop outside the convenience store where I'd taken shelter from the rain. The driver opened the door for me and gestured for me to get off. I stepped off the bus and onto the pavement, unsure why the driver had brought me back here. As I turned to thank him, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The bus and the people on it were gone. 1 second they had been there, and the next they had vanished, leaving me alone on the street. I looked around frantically, unsure where to go or what to do. Then I noticed a figure standing in the doorway of the boarded-up convenience store. I walked toward the figure, my heart pounding in my chest, hoping it was a person, hoping it was someone who could help me. But when I got closer, I saw that it was just an empty coat hanging on the door handle. I ran my hand over the rough wood of the door, feeling the emptiness of the store pressing against me. I closed my eyes, trying to make sense of what had happened. When I opened them again, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The clock above the store's entrance read 11:58 p.m., the same time I'd seen when I first arrived in this town. Panic surged through me. I was trapped in a time loop, reliving the same moments over and over again. I turned and ran down the street, desperate to find the bus or anyone who could help me break the curse. But as I ran, I noticed that everything was changing. The buildings were different, the street signs were gone. I didn't recognize any of it. Suddenly, I bumped into a woman walking down the street. She looked at me with surprised eyes. "Can you help me?" I asked, my voice trembling. She didn't answer. Instead, she stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away. As I watched her go, I noticed that she wasn't walking towards any particular destination. She was walking in circles, just like the man I'd met in the park. I called out to her, but she didn't respond. I was completely alone in this town. I tried to retrace my steps, to find my way back to the bus or the school, but everything looked the same. The buildings, the streets, even the shadows seemed to mock my confusion. I sank down onto a nearby bench, defeated. Then I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned to see a man walking toward me. He was tall and thin, with a face etched with lines and wrinkles. He stopped in front of me and stared at me intently. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Why are you here?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and touched my arm. His touch was cold, like ice water seeping into my bones. As his fingers made contact with my skin, a jolt of energy surged through me. Memories flooded my mind, memories that weren't mine. I saw the man's face contorted in pain as he held his arm, his eyes filled with terror. Then I saw him collapse to the ground, his body riddled with arrows. The memories faded and I collapsed onto the bench, overwhelmed by the sudden rush of emotions. Who was this man? What had happened to him? And why did his pain feel like my own? I looked up at the man, but his face was obscured by the shadows cast by the flickering street lights. "Who are you?" I asked again, my voice stronger this time. The man removed his hat, revealing a bald head with a single white streak running down the middle. "I am Hollow Street," he said, his voice a raspy whisper. "And you are its newest resident." Before I could respond, Hollow Street lunged at me, his eyes burning with an eerie green light. I screamed and backed away, knocking over the bench in my haste to escape. As I ran, I could hear Hollow Street's footsteps pounding on the pavement behind me. I didn't dare look back to see if he was catching up. Instead, I focused on putting as much distance between us as possible. I ran down the street, past the buildings I'd explored earlier, past the playground and the clock tower, deeper and deeper into the abandoned town. I could hear Hollow Street getting closer. His breathing was heavy, his footsteps echoing my fear. Suddenly, I stumbled and fell, scraping my knee on the pavement. Pain shot up my leg, bringing tears to my eyes. I struggled to my feet, knowing that if Hollow Street caught me, I wouldn't escape with just a few scratches. As I ran, I could feel his presence closing in on me, like a shadow enveloping me in darkness. I put all of my strength into my legs, kicking them faster, running harder than I ever had before. But my efforts were in vain. Hollow Street's hand clamped down on my shoulder, stopping me in my tracks. I turned to face him, my heart pounding in my chest. He leaned in close, his breath hot on my ear. "You can't escape," he whispered. "You're trapped in Hollow Street forever." With that, he lunged, his sharp teeth glinting in the darkness. I screamed and struggled, but it was no use. Hollow Street was strong, too strong for me to fight off. He pinned me to the ground, his weight pressing down on me. I could feel his icy fingers digging into my arms, anchoring me to the ground. I looked into his eyes, pleading for mercy, but there was none to be found. Hollow Street's face was twisted in a snarl, his eyes blazing with a cold fire. "You're mine now," he growled, his voice echoing my fear. Just when I thought all hope was lost, a familiar voice rang out. "Let him go," the voice commanded. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure emerge from the darkness. It was the woman I'd met earlier, the one who'd ignored my pleas for help. She stood tall, her eyes blazing with an inner light. She took a step forward and Hollow Street recoiled as if burned. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed, his voice laced with venom. "I'm here because you're hurting him," the woman replied, her voice ringing with power. "And I won't stand for it." With a surge of strength, the woman strode forward and ripped Hollow Street off of me. He snarled and lunged, but she was too quick for him. She dodged his grasp and sent a kick flying toward his face. The impact sent Hollow Street crashing to the ground. He lay still for a moment before scrambling to his feet. With a final growl, he vanished into the darkness. As quickly as he'd appeared, the woman turned to me, her eyes softening. "Are you all right?" she asked. I nodded, my voice still shaking. "What's happening?" The woman sat down beside me on the bench. "This is a place where people come to escape," she explained. "A place where their darkest fears become real." "How do I get back home?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You have to face your fears," the woman replied. "Only then can you find your way back." With that, she rose to her feet and offered me a hand. "Will you come with me?" she asked. I looked into her eyes, searching for any hint of deceit. Finding none, I took her hand and let her lead me away from the bench, deeper into the abandoned town. And so began my journey through the labyrinth of Hollow Street, guided by the enigmatic woman who held the key to my escape. Little did I know that my greatest challenge lay not in escaping the town, but in facing the darkness within myself. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and subscribe. See you next time.